My neighbor turned out to be a stalker. After months of unsettling behavior, notes, and a disturbing encounter, finally he was arrested, and I moved away. Hey, Reddit, I don't even know where to start. I guess the most important thing is that I'm safe now. But for the longest time, I didn't think I would be. I didn't even know if I was imagining things at first, but I was being stalked by a man who, as it turns out, wasn't just some creepy guy with a fixation on me. No, he was far worse. He was a serial killer. And I only realized that after leaving the city and seeing the news about what he'd been doing all along. So I guess I should start from the beginning. It all started one chilly fall evening, a few months ago. I live alone in a small apartment downtown. I'm 27F, not exactly a social butterfly, but I have a few close friends I hang out with from time to time. I work as a graphic designer for a marketing agency. My life wasn't anything extraordinary, just the usual work, eat, sleep cycle. I didn't think anything about it when I started noticing small things at first. Little moments that, in hindsight, should have made me run for the hills. One evening after work, I was heading to the local coffee shop, my usual stop. The streets were busy with people rushing home, cars honking in the distance, the hum of city life surrounding me. But then I noticed him. A man probably in his late 30s, average build, dark hair, dressed in a black hoodie and jeans, standing near the entrance of the coffee shop. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed his eyes. He was staring at me, not in a quick glance, but in a way that made my skin crawl. He didn't even look away when I caught his gaze. I remember thinking, maybe he just knows me from somewhere. But that thought didn't sit right with me. I shrugged it off, grabbed my coffee, and went home. The next few days felt like a déjà vu. I'd see him again, always lurking around different places outside my apartment building, walking past my office during lunch, and once even standing at the bus stop when I was heading home. He never approached me directly, never said anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I convinced myself it was a coincidence. After all, people don't just get stalked, right? That only happens in movies or asterisk someone else's asterisk life, not mine. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing discomfort I felt every time I saw him. The moments kept piling up, more strange encounters, more instances where I'd feel his eyes on me from across the street or from the shadows. One day, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head after work when I saw him again. He was standing outside the corner store, watching me from a distance. I turned the corner quickly, hoping to lose him. But when I glanced back, there he was, following me. I picked up my pace, walking faster, hoping he'd lose interest, but he didn't. I could feel him trailing behind me, close enough that I could hear his footsteps. At that point, my anxiety was through the roof. I'd read enough Reddit horror stories to know that this was no coincidence anymore. This was deliberate. I had to get away, and fast. I ducked into a nearby alley, hoping to shake him off. But the alley was narrow, and there was nowhere to hide. When I turned the corner to make a run for it, I came face to face with him. He wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. He was standing there, blocking my way, his eyes wide with that same unsettling stare. I froze. "Hey," he said, his voice low and almost mocking. "You seem to be avoiding me. Why?" My heart pounded in my chest. I managed to force out a reply. "I don't know you." He didn't respond. Instead, he took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I could feel the panic setting in. What did he want? Why was he doing this? Before I could think of anything else, he backed away slightly, giving me space to pass. I didn't waste time. I ran straight back to my apartment, bolting the door behind me as soon as I was inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see him standing there, staring. It wasn't just a random encounter anymore. This man knew me. Things only got worse after that. I started noticing that he was everywhere in the background of photos I took while out with friends, standing across the street when I'd walk home, and once even outside my apartment building in the middle of the night. I tried taking different routes to work, but somehow he always found me. It was terrifying, but I was too afraid to go to the police. I kept thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. After all, he hadn't touched me. He hadn't done anything overtly threatening, just watching. Then one day, things crossed a line. I was at the grocery store, just picking up some essentials when I spotted him standing in the aisle across from me. My blood ran cold. He smiled at me, and I felt my stomach flip. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was predatory. I didn't wait around. I grabbed what I could and bolted out of the store, nearly running into a wall as I rushed to my car. But the moment I started the engine and looked in my rearview mirror, there he was again, just standing there, watching me drive away. That's when I knew. I couldn't stay here anymore. I had to leave. I packed my things that night and didn't look back. I moved to a smaller town a couple of hours away, thinking that a change of scenery would give me the peace I needed. I threw away my old phone, got a new one, and deleted all my social media accounts. It felt like I was running away from a nightmare. But it didn't work. I kept seeing news reports about missing women. At first, it didn't click, but the more I read, the more I realized the pattern. All the women who had gone missing had been stalked first. And then they were found dead. That's when the chilling thought hit me. What if I wasn't just a random victim? What if I was next? It wasn't until a few months later that I saw his face again. This time, I wasn't in the city. I was sitting in a diner in the small town, scrolling through the local news. And there, in the headline, was his face, the same man who had been stalking me. The news article revealed a horrifying truth. David Hamilton, the man I had been avoiding, had been stalking multiple women for months before eventually killing them. I wasn't just a random target. I was his obsession. And I was lucky that I had left before he got the chance to hurt me. But the other women, they weren't so lucky. David wasn't just a stalker. He was a serial killer, and I had been on his list. In the months since, I've learned more about David Hamilton than I ever wanted to know. He was caught, obviously, but it wasn't until his trial that I found out the full extent of his crimes. He had been planning his murders for a long time. Every woman he stalked, including me, was carefully selected. We all fit a specific type. I wasn't the first woman he'd followed, and I sure as hell wouldn't have been the last if I hadn't gotten away. The police told me that I had narrowly escaped being another victim of his twisted game. But now, every time I hear a siren or see someone watching me, I feel the old terror bubbling up again. I don't know if I'll ever truly be free of the fear. It haunts me, even now. Every day is a reminder of what could have happened. But I'm telling you all this now because I want you to know. If you ever get the feeling that someone is watching you, trust your instincts, don't ignore it. I did, and it almost cost me my life. Stay safe, Reddit. And don't let anyone make you feel like you're imagining things. Trust your gut. It could save your life. So here is an update, guys. David Hamilton wasn't just a stalker. And the more I learned about him through the police reports, the more disturbing it became. He hadn't just been following women at random. There was a method to his madness, a sick, twisted reason behind everything he did. The authorities told me that David had a very particular type of victim in mind. He didn't go after the most obvious targets, women who were alone or vulnerable. No, he stalked women who seemed completely normal on the outside, women like me who lived independent lives, who had jobs, families, and friends. Women who looked strong, who looked like they had control of their lives. He didn't just want to kill them, he wanted to break them, to strip away everything that made them feel safe. He followed them for weeks or months, learning their routines, picking the perfect moment to strike. David didn't seem to hate us. In fact, some of the other victims described strange interactions with him. He would sometimes give them compliments or make them feel like they had a special connection. He was always polite, friendly even, and yet, when the time came, he turned into a monster. It was as if he was trying to convince himself that what he was doing wasn't wrong, that his connection to us was more than just obsession. He was confused. In his mind, we weren't just victims, we were something else. He treated us like possessions he could control. And that's what scared me the most. He wasn't just obsessed with watching me. The police speculated that he was likely trying to justify his actions to himself, rationalizing the way he treated us. His first few victims were women he had worked with, women he thought he could love. But when they rejected him or simply didn't respond in the way he expected, he became violent. His behavior didn't make sense to me at first. How could someone who was so normal on the outside, someone who blended into a crowd and could hold a conversation with anyone, turn out to be capable of such depravity? But the more I dug into his history, the more I realized how deep his psychological issues ran. He had been isolated for years, never forming deep relationships, always watching people from the shadows. He seemed to be searching for validation, for control. And when he couldn't find it through normal means, he turned to violence. It wasn't until David's arrest that I started to piece together everything that had happened. The authorities had been watching him for weeks before they finally caught him. He'd been under surveillance after multiple women had come forward with disturbing stories about being followed or harassed. At first, they couldn't connect the dots. After all, David had been careful. He made sure to keep his distance, to never get too close, so his stalking never crossed the line into something overtly criminal. But after a few women went missing, they realized there was a pattern. The same man appearing at the scene of multiple disappearances, fitting the description of the stalker. When they finally arrested him, they discovered a chilling collection of photographs, journal entries, and even videos of his victims, women he had been stalking for months before killing them. His obsession with me wasn't unique. I wasn't the only one he'd fixated on. The worst part, the authorities discovered that David had never planned to stop. The last victim he stalked before being caught was a woman who lived just a few streets away from me. He had been planning to make his move, but he was caught just days before. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to becoming one of his victims. Even though David had been arrested, my life still felt consumed by the fear he had instilled in me. I moved out of the small town to start over somewhere else, away from the memories of what happened. But leaving didn't mean forgetting. For weeks, I had nightmares. In my dreams, I would see David's face, always just out of reach, always following me, always waiting for me to slip up. The terror I had lived with for so long didn't just vanish with his arrest. It lingered. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, checking the locks on my door twice, avoiding dark alleys and empty streets. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me again, even when I was hundreds of miles away. I tried to talk to a therapist about it, but it felt like no one could understand the kind of fear I'd lived with. The constant unease, the sense that I was never truly safe, even when I had moved far away from where it all started. The media coverage of David's case only made it worse. Every time I saw his face on the news, it was like I was reliving everything. The interviews with his other victims, the families of the women he had killed, their grief, it was all too much. I felt like a fraud, Like I had no right to feel so terrified when other women had lost so much more. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself from feeling guilty, wondering if I could have done something to stop him earlier. I still don't know the answer to that question. It's been a few months now, and I'm slowly starting to piece my life back together. I've kept my distance from social media, changed my routines, and even started seeing a new therapist who specializes in trauma recovery. It's hard, and I still have days where I feel like I'm back in that city, running from a ghost that never leaves. But I've come to terms with something, ***, David Hamilton won't ever control my life again, ***. He may have stalked me, he may have come too close to taking my life, but I survived. I'm still here. I won't let his twisted obsession with me define who I am. And to anyone reading this who's ever been in a similar situation, trust your instincts. Don't let fear silence you. If you feel like someone is watching you, don't hesitate to get help. It doesn't matter how small the signs seem at first. They're not small if they make you uncomfortable. David thought he was invisible. He thought he could control me, but I escaped him. And I'll never stop running toward safety.